Howdy folks, Doc here with Last Best Tool, and Civivi has a new exciting design out. This is in collaboration with, yes, that is Ken Onion Jr., the son of the famous Ken Onion, the Blade Hall of Famer. Ken Onion was instrumental in many designs. He worked with Kershaw, works currently with CRKT, designed sharpening tools, and he actually was the creator of this assist mechanism called Speed Safe that Kershaw used. So you just start a slight movement on this flipper lever and the blade fires out lightning speed, called a Speed Safe, and it does have a little locking mechanism, kind of just a sliding screw that gets in the way of the blade to hold it. But anyway, Ken Onion has many designs. He's probably in your knife drawer, whether you know it or not, or at least influence. This is the Krabby. The Krabby, great name, comes in a couple of different handle flavors and blade coatings. This one here is a 14C 28N blade, stone washed, very mature shape. We'll get to that. It also has G10 scales that are attached in the center. That's kind of unique there. A full-size pocket clip, we'll get to that. 3 different lanyard holes, kind of a nod to something with a G10 backspacer here. It is using a liner lock with a hefty liner, we'll get to that, and 2 thumb studs, but it only has a right-hand carry pocket clip, not reversible there. So, years ago, we all thought we wanted things like these clip point blades. This is a Buck 110, a classic one of the early ones, because this is round, or this is squared off, kind of 90 degree. The newer ones, they rounded, newer like in the 1980s. But anyway, this guy here seemed to be what everybody wanted, even though this blade style is fairly limited. It's got a weak breakable tip here. It's very long compared to the bit of belly on the front. This clip point, since we don't sharpen it anymore, it just is a weak accrement of the blade. It doesn't necessarily help anything. This is a spine lock that does not feel all that great. It's a big heavy mechanism, having that bar spring loaded. This I've had since a kid. I keep it because, it's a piece of history, but it is not the best to use. I like a lot of the newer designs. I mean, when you go to some of these others, you've got button locks, you've got a modified Warncliffe, sort of a utility knife, built-in carabiner there. This thug is wonderful. I find I use this tip, or this it's not the tip, it's a facet, a corner of the blade, quite a bit. So I think there's maybe some evolution that could take place that really goes after whatever's going on at that bend. But it's got a flat blade here, it's got a bit of belly. The point is lined up with the spine of the knife rather than, in a lot of cases, the center of the knife, which is more of a thrusting action to keep the knife aligned when it encounters the workpiece on the front end. But let's go ahead and go to these two. Now, a lot of people, when they're doing knife reviews, they do stuff that I don't think anyone really should be doing with a knife review. Let's slice up some rocks first of all, and then I'm going to baton some rebar and see what happens, and then let's beat on it with a sledgehammer until the sledgehammer breaks. Instead, if you're using a knife for the things knives are made of, you really have to sort of absorb the features of the blade and see if that fits in with the knife use lifestyle. That's where I think this is quite a mature design, a 21st century, mid-21st century design. Now, Zach in the Wild produced a design for this one that Civivi made. It won an award at Blade Show. To me, this is kind of neat. This is like a beginning knife design, good knife design, well executed. This is like a mature version of it. So first of all, the blade is thicker, yet the tip is narrower. Figure that one out. So you've got a finer tip, but a stronger blade. The liners, obviously this is a liner lock, but the liners on the Ken Onion Jr. Krabby are a little bit thicker. Now that does add weight, but this is still under 3 ounces. Fraction under 3 ounces, but it's there. If you look at the pocket clip is a full size. Obviously our pockets aren't changing size based on the knife we carry, but this one does have a little bit deeper reach here, or a thicker reach, so it gets over seams, especially carpentry pants, things like that, or if you clip it on other stuff, backpack straps, things like that. This is using a I guess I call them axis locks, crossbar locks. That's to me, a more advanced locking mechanism. You pay for it. It is a little more fragile, say, than a liner lock. But, you know, for your first knife out to go with that, you know, I would like to have options, although there's nothing wrong with it. A lot of Benchmades come out of the box, you know, or out of the gates, I should say, with that design. Now, let's take a look at the belly and the faceting here. The radius on this is much larger. In other words, if this is an arc of a circle, the distance from the diameter to the edge is going to be much greater than this one. This rounds a little faster. So that means what? Well, if you look at the way you hold the knife, this one's got a choil up at the front, which allows your finger to move beyond the handle. This one does not. It's got a fairly substantial guard, so that's a more crude holding of the knife this is designed for, rather than the precision here. If you've got a thicker spine, it is nice to be able to move up and control that, which then the tip comes into play a little bit more for precision work. That was always the problem here, is you got this great big pointy tip out on the front that was always catching on things in both directions. So if you're trying to slice, you know, if you try to ever gut a deer or something, you really have to be careful, so much so that a lot of times people are just keeping their finger up at the tip so they know where it is, so they don't do damage. But it would be much easier just to get a more appropriate blade that doesn't have something that catches quite as hard and isn't going to snap off. Little faceting up at the front end, kind of nice. The handle on this, the G10, comes in about 4 flavors, as well as blade coatings. The liner lock, good simple design. It's pretty thin. You know, I do find that I have to push down a little bit. So it is a minimalist here. But it's kind of interesting. I wonder if Ken Onion Jr. has smaller hands or something. The position here is really tight. I can easily, you know, slide my thumb in there and get that. But as you see there, I kind of slipped a little. That spacing is off just a touch, or it's a little bit less than there. Let's see if you can see how those line up. I'll show you with the thug. It'll make it much more obvious. So you can see not only in the position with the pivot, which has to do with the flick angle, but how far up that is for, you know, sliding your thumb up in there. This one also with that liner, or with that crossbar lock, is a much softer release compared to this, which does have a detent to pop through. But if you look like at this thug, how far out that is from that finger choil, you know, you really gotta pay attention, I think, a little bit more on the Krabby. And on this one, nice finger choil there. This is just a sharpening choil. This is a unique knife. Love this thing, but I think it opens up a lot of questions. But anyway, going back to the Krabby here, sells for about $62, $63 street price when it's available. Uses a G10 back spacer here, also in purple, skeletonized liners there. The blade is about 2.7 inches. The overall length on this is about 6.4 inches, and then when it's closed, it's about 3.7 inches. So nice pocket carry, real simple, fun design. I hope Ken Onion Jr. does more with his knives, or with Civivi and their knives. I think it makes them quite affordable. And I think the production facilities at Civivi must allow them to be really nimble and work on various you know, modifications without having to really change the whole line. So there it is. Glad it's released. Good, solid, mature design, mid-21st century, useful blade. The Ken Onion Jr. Krabby. Kind of a fun name too. And with that, Doc out.